so much for coming out on a rainy Saturday. My name is Janelle Riley. I'm an editor of Variety. I'm so thrilled to welcome you here for this screening with not just the best animated movie of the year, but one of the best movies of the year. I'm so happy it was worth the wait. At this time, please join me in welcoming three of the artists who brought this film to life. The film's writer-director Brad Bird and Craig T. Nelson and Helen Well, all superheroes, I have to say. And of course, you voice the wonderful Edna, so I don't mean to sell you short. I guess you probably also provided craft services, like I know.
You know, I do windows. You know, security.
Whenever I have people as accomplished as you all are, I actually like to go back to the beginning and just ask, what was your first job in this business? The first time you sort of felt you could call yourself an animator or an actor?
My first job was at Disney. I was an animator at Disney when I started when I was 20, and it was actually really hard to get into Disney back then because they were only making one animated film every 3 years, and so it was the crews were relatively small, and that's when I started.
Wow. Started out just like right at the animation?
Well, I mean, I was doing animation. They called it, they paid me as an assistant animator, which was their little scheme back then. It was a way to get animation even more cheaply. Mm-hmm. And so, even though I was paid as an assistant, which is where you help a supervising animator finish their scenes, you do the in-between drawings and stuff like that. I never did that. I was always animating. So, yeah, I worked on this not very good film called Small One, and I worked on Fox and the Hound.
Oh, no way. Yeah. One of my childhood staples. Well, sorry.
No, I'm sorry too. So.
That movie.
Well, okay. There's some good parts in it.
You guys?
When I was in 5th grade, my 5th grade teacher, Miss Sharp, asked me would I do a scene with my best friend, Jenny Miller, if we would do a scene from The Miracle Worker. And so I played Helen Keller and Jenny played Ann Sullivan. And we did there's one knockdown drag out scene in the movie where like they tear the place apart, and so we did that scene.
And the bug.
And I had so much fun. It was like.
And that's when you knew?
No, but that was like a great taste. But then I probably felt like I knew what I wanted to do when I was 15. And doing high school musicals.
Yeah. Oh, what musicals did you do?
You know, tons. I mean, so many. But the first one was The Boyfriend. I did Oklahoma. I did Fiddler on the Roof. I played Yenta.
But in it, she tore the room apart. So improvise.
That started, and then The Incredibles. I continued the.
Yes, everywhere. Great for you.
I was Mr. Peanut for Planters Peanut Company. Dressed up in a fiberglass peanut outfit. I was about 8 feet tall. That was my introduction. I was a senior in high school. And a little kid shoved me into traffic. So then I got out of that, and I went into, I was a writer and performer with Barry Levinson and Rudy DeLuca. And that's how we started.
You wrote for the Smothers Brothers too, right?
Smothers Brothers and John Biner, Alan King.
I'm only laughing about being pushed into traffic because it obviously worked out okay. You're fine now.
No, it affected me.
Then he became an actor.
I hate children and have trouble with peanuts.
So on to The Incredibles, and obviously the first movie was such a phenomenon. I mean, it wasn't just a great animated movie. You were also nominated for screenplay, for some editing, sound editing awards. It really sort of changed the game, and I have to think that as soon as that movie came out, people were bugging you about a sequel. So I guess I'm sort of curious, why so long?
I know. Well, this is the first time that question has ever been.
Yeah, exactly.
So I'll try to come up with it. It wasn't a plan to take this long. It was obviously, if it was a plan, it was a very ill-conceived plan. I had two of the main elements of the idea early on. When we were publicizing the first film, I had the idea of the role switch between these two characters. And I also knew that I had the unexploded bomb of Jack Jack, that the audience knew that he had multiple powers, but the Pars did not.
Yeah.
So those two I knew played very well with each other, because if he were put in charge of the family right at the point where the baby, it's already hard being a normal parent, and then to suddenly have this Swiss Army knife of powers would make it even worse. And for anyone that has children, when you first have them, it's like they're designed to make you think, hey, this isn't so bad, this is kind of easy, because they stay put, they mainly sleep, even their poops don't smell too bad, or they're like, oh, this is kind of a cute poop, right? This is not so bad. Parenting is easy. And so they lull you, the system lulls you into thinking that, and then the moment the kids get mobile, you're on high alert for the next 15 years. Yeah, emergency alert.
30.
30, well, okay. I'm kidding myself, I guess. Yeah. But then they can grab anything. Everything is dangerous. They want to see what the fork is like in the socket. And so and the poops become progressively more toxic until by the point where you need them to get toilet trained. You need a hazmat suit to change one of these diapers. So anyway, Jack Jack is an abstraction of that anxiety, because he can literally go through a wall or turn into water or do whatever. And it's a nightmare version of parents' anxiety. Yeah.
And for you guys, did you always know there would be a sequel, and were you sort of waiting anxiously, or did you just figure it would come when it was time?
Well, I mean, for me, there was a point where I was like, there's probably going to be a sequel. And then after years went by, then I went, I don't think so. And so then I just figured that there would not be. And so when one came about, it was like a really pleasant surprise. And then it ended up being a blast to do.
Yeah.
In Sam Jackson's mind, there was definitely going to be a sequel, and I was the only one that didn't know about it. So that was interesting.
Yeah, I don't know how many times he told me we're going to do this.
Yeah,
Sam.
he told me too.
Sam,
I was like,
on the golf course, he said, "Oh, gee, you hear we're doing a sequel?" No. Oh yeah, and then I'd see him 2 years later. Oh yeah, we're doing it.
Yeah.
I just talked to him. Sam says, I just talked to him. You talked to him? How come we didn't talk to him?
I was just running into him various things, and he's like, so I'm ready. Come on, where's the script? And it was like, oh, are we doing this? Yeah, so in Sam's mind, it was a done deal, and basically reality caught up to him, yeah.
What was it like for you guys revisiting the characters after all these years?
I don't, for me it was, that was, the thing is, doing this particular animated project with Brad, you do it with Brad, so it's not like doing a movie where you have a caravan of people who you are collaborating with. In this situation, it's Brad. So it was just, for me,
it's making it sound nightmarish.
It's just me and Brad. And so it was like, for me, fun as hell, because that's all I had to do. I did not have to do the movie. So for me, it was like really fun. for Brad, it was the pressure of, you know, getting the movie out there and directing it, writing it, making the entire thing work. Was his perspective on that is entirely 100% different from mine. But for me, it was just kind of a delight to go hang out with Brad for a few hours every month.
But for you, it was a nightmare.
Well, I pitched an idea. I was going to say, I had those 2/3 of the idea when we were publicizing the first film, but I couldn't figure out the villain part, the part that is the superhero part, you know, the plot of what does the villain want, who is the villain, how do we hide the villain, blah, 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 blah. All that stuff. And finally I got an idea that I liked, and I pitched it, and Pixar liked it, and we got a green light from Disney, and we're starting to move, and about 3 months or 4 months into that, Disney comes to me, or Pixar actually, and says, we're not gonna, Toy Story 4 has trouble, we need more time to work on the story, we wanna move you up a year.
Oh my God.
And we were like, good, you know, and yet I'd been through Ratatouille, which was
Did you have a choice? I mean, could you have said...
I could have probably fought back, but then I thought, then we're coming out in 2 years, could we do it? It seemed like we could, even though it would be really hard. And so I went, okay, I think we can do that. And then the story didn't work. The story that I got greenlit had problems fitting with the roll switch and the Jack part that I was committed to. So I had to change that story, and I couldn't sit there and go, you know, if I put a few more weeks work, it may work. Because if I wasn't sure that it would work with 2 more weeks, then I was losing 2 weeks, and the oncoming release date wasn't changing. So I had to just, if something was slowing me up and didn't work, I had to just jettison it.
Wow.
And you know, keep the parts that I liked if there was anything that I could use. And so there were, the villain changed, and then the modus of the operandi of the villain changed, and you know, it became the story about Winston Dever, and then he had a brother that he didn't get along with, and then that didn't work, and the brother became a sister, and it just kept, that part of the story kept changing. And it was kind of like the first film, where I had everything figured out when I came up to Pixar to do it, except for I had a different villain, and there was an opening sequence that we did where we were going to start with the cars right when they went underground. And I needed to show that why they were put into a witness relocation program, essentially, is that there are villains who want to get the superheroes. And if they go into hiding, those are the people that are going to be coming after them. So I had to establish that, and so I invented a bad guy to have them kill him off in the opening sequence, and that was Syndrome. And when I did that sequence, which I really like, by the way, and it's on the, it's in story reel form, it's on the disc of the first movie, everyone liked him better than, including me, better than the villain that we had.
Really?
So he didn't die. He ended up becoming the villain, and then it was like, well, what's his beef? What's his backstory? And somebody at the same time had said, oh yeah, there's this great book, and so I read this book by Burt Ward. I skimmed it, really, didn't really read it, but
Oh, My Life as Robin?
yes,
Yeah.
and who was Robin on the TV Batman, and he had this kind of underlying beef with Adam West. It was like, I got more chicks than Adam West did, you know? And I thought, this is an interesting angle. It's like the second banana is kind of pissed, you know, and like what if Robin was pissed at Batman, and what if this guy wanted to be Robin and was refused?
Wow.
You know, so that became Syndrome.
Well, so you owe part of this to Burt Ward.
A little part to Burt. Well, I'm not saying that Burt Ward is twisted with it, but it was underneath there was a little bit of resentment.
Yeah.
You know?
That's hilarious.
Yeah.
For you guys, what are some of the misconceptions about voice acting? I have to admit that I thought, oh, it's easy. You can show up in your pajamas and walk into a booth.
Everyone thinks that.
It's so hard. Voiceover is tough work.
No, it isn't.
Well, I showed up in my pajamas.
It's a lot of fun.
I'm going to play you back some tapes.
Oh, Lord.
Oh, Lord, you want me to say it again?
Yeah, I mean, it's... when they decided to do a sequel, for me, I wasn't sure I could do it because my voice just didn't sound right to me.
Really?
As in the first one. And Brad assured me that it was okay, you know. And I just remember the first session we had, it was like, I was a little bit anxious about that, you know. It just seemed like the register had changed. But anyway, it's like, it's what Holly said. You go in there and you're dealing, you got Brad and you've got an idea. Now, also that idea is going to change somewhat. And you have to be ready for that. Oh, you know, the work that you do in that session, he may come back in the next session or the session after that and says, oh yeah, you remember what we did in the session before? And you know, for me, I don't remember anything. So, oh yeah, I say yes, I remember. And he says, okay, we're going to do that again. Why? Well, we have certain reasons why we're going to do that again. I said, well, I didn't really, okay, well, let's do it again, because I really didn't like what I did, what I remember of what I did. So that's a good idea. So you do it again. Now you're doing it again. Now you're doing it again.
Well, you have to be. Here's what he's talking about. He's got
I thought
to
it was
convey.
quite plain when I was talking. See, this is what happens.
If I point out the scenes that we had trouble getting just perfect, it's because his character has to change his emotions in 16 different directions very precisely on a dime. And it's written that way, like the scene where he goes, I'm trying to keep it the boyfriend, you know, I'm trying to process it, I'm trying to, you know, he's conveying all these things bunched together, jammed together, so they seem spontaneous, and yet they each one have to be clear. And it's hard, and it's condensed, and it's boiled down. And part of the reason that you try to nail it is what takes him 10 seconds to say is going to take an animator 2 months to animate. And they're going to listen to this 10,000 times. Right. And if it's all there, then they have the firmest foundation to take it into the stratosphere. Right. And if it's a casual performance or an only half-hearted, then they're gonna either become desperate and do a lot of gestures to try to juice it up that aren't right, or they're going to do a compulsory sort of bit of animation. And so they, you know, everything's standing on what you guys do. And you know, those are tall orders, those scenes. You're not rehearsing them. You're coming in and reading them off a piece of paper and having to work with it. And so it's hard. It's hard work. And most of the people that have never done it before, by the end of the 2-hour session, they're wrung out. They are exhausted because it demands that much concentration.
Yeah. Okay, so...
He's already tired. Just listening to me.
I don't know how many times we did math is math.
Yes. Yeah.
Math is math. I got so tired of saying it. I said, what's wrong with the one I just did? It's not right. It's not... That was good. Let's do it again. Math is math! You know, I can't even do it. Anyway, and the Rubbers of Sleep, which is my favorite.
Rubbers of Freak.
That too. It was more fun. I had to redo that, I don't know how many times.
Because you're falling asleep slowly while you're saying it. It's tough to do. Except the fact that it's hard to do and you did it perfectly.
Yes. Yeah, it was.
Yes.
Ooh, take the compliment.
Yes, take the compliment.
But it is fun. It's really interesting because you'll go in and when it changes, he says, okay, you know, he's got pages and you get the pages and you're, you know, like you might be at Disney or one of these great iconic places of recording where it's like you're in this environment it's you really do look forward to it. And then when Brad says, "Oh, by the way, I've changed a little bit here," and so now you're into some new ground. Now you feel like you're part of a process that you can help along, because you know that he's changed something in his head story-wise for a reason, and it's going to make a difference. And you want to do the best job you can. So it's different, and it is exhausting.
I think, you know, that thing that Jerry Seinfeld does so well, that like Jerry Seinfeld, he's so particularly brilliant at this, which is no matter how mad Jerry Seinfeld gets, it's funny. If he's like, you know, smoke is coming out of it's funny. And so that was always interesting to find the timbre of anger or rage that the character that Mrs. Incredible would experience, so that it had that buoyancy underneath it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that it's not like Eugene O'Neill, but it's
Eugenia O'Neill.
Eugenia O'Neill. Or Jenny, if you would, O'Neill. So yeah, that was those kind of, the tone of some of the scenes was interesting to explore, to find where it lived, where it landed, and it would still have this je ne sais quoi, if you will.
Yeah. Well, you want it to sound unexpected, and somebody said I think that in a weird way I was influenced when I was a kid. They had these animated commercials, and they were very stylized, but usually the soundtracks on them were kind of spontaneous and weird, and people would make mistakes and mispronounce things and correct themselves. And Bob and Ray, I know this is obscure, but to a lot of people, but Bob and Ray is this great comedy team, and they're both gone now, but they're really funny, and they would do these beer commercials, and they were animated. I don't remember, but I just remember being a kid, I liked those weird little commercials. And Disney soundtracks for the Disney features often had kind of improvisatory stuff. Like if you listen to Phil Harris as Baloo the Bear, it sounds like a guy that just, you know, was partying down the street, kind of wandered into a recording studio, and like he's having a good time. And that's not easy to capture. And one thing I love about working with actors of the caliber of Holly and Craig is that they can make something that's written sound spontaneous. And there's a line reading that you did on where you go, "Thank you, it's too much for us." And he goes, "To the house? Is it a house?" And it's like you're being rushed there and given something, and you're not even quite clear on what it is yet. You've just been, and it's there in the reading that you're finishing your sentence with a question mark, like you're being rushed to a place that you don't even know what it is, and yet it's going to be where you live. And that's underneath that very simple line. And I love that. And when in the first film, when she's flying the jet, her character is flying the jet, and she comes under attack, we had all this real language that pilots use to describe things, you know, and it's battle stuff. And it's them being able to respond and be clear about where they are and what their situation is. And so we had all this lingo that was real pilots lingo. And Holly didn't just read it. She said, "Okay, hold on a second." And she asked me to explain every single term, what it meant, you know, and in what context, you know, and when they say angels 12, you know, what does that mean, and all this stuff. And so I took about 10 minutes explaining each one the way it had been explained to me, and we had gotten it from our head of story knew a fighter pilot, and so he got it from a fighter pilot. And so I described it, and she was noting each thing and understanding each thing. And then when she launched into it the first time, man, I got chills. I felt like I was on a plane that was in trouble, and I'm just sitting in a recording room, and that anxiety and her knowledge of flight, and the fact that she's got to be clear and not lose her shit, but also be, there's anxiety in the voice. In other words, there's simultaneously cool, the cool that a seasoned pilot has, and anxiety. That's a tough little nail to hit. And
the anxiety of a mother.
Yes, yes, but it's all in that. And so, again, hats off to you.
And
made me drop my water.
Have you always had a facility with voices? Because I'm listening to you talk, and I don't hear Edna in there at all. It's so strange.
No. Oh, thank you. I don't either. Crush from Nemo?
Yeah.
No, that's Andrew Stanton, who directed that film. So, yeah. But I did, there's one other guy that I did in here. Who is it? Oh, I did Brick. I am called Brick.
And do you make yourself do these like over and over again as well?
The reason I do scratch voices is usually I can get close to the rhythm of what I want most quickly, and I know they're going to be replaced anyway. Yeah. So I don't take much time doing them. It just kind of gets in the ballpark and we can move on. It's not because I think I'm the world's greatest person, and every once in a while people like them and want to keep them, so that's okay too. I'm cheap and available, you know.
I'm going to take a couple quick questions before we go. You can start right down here.
Congratulations on the film.
Oh, thanks.
I wondered if you could talk about there's so many great gags across the whole film that are, you know, comedic, but the usage of the powers for the good guys and the bad guys, the family elements and the teams, but they're all, you're always follow stories Kane, they all drive the story. So it's so easy to get too slapstick or just put in cool action for action's sake. Everything's still driving the story. So I was wondering, what does your process look like for that, as far as there's so many, and like are animators pitching you on stuff, or do you have some guidelines?
Yeah, well, some of them are my ideas that I just have always, some of them are things that I've wanted to do in some context for years, and I find a place to do. You know, it's almost like a recipe that you have, you know, saved away. Oh, remember this one? And obviously we have a lot of talented people working on the film, and people come up with things all the time, and so it's a little of both, I would say. And the goal is to always plus, and there's sometimes if you add too many things, they become minuses. So one of the hardest things to do as a director is to let go of an idea that's really funny and good, and those happen too. And sometimes an animator will animate a scene and it's brilliant, and the room explodes with laughter, and it's so funny, and you have to sit there and go, I have to say no, because it's going to undo something else that's really important. And sometimes the really important thing is 10 minutes later, but it's all connected. It's like a nervous system, and it becomes the longer a film is, because I've done shorter films, I've done 5-minute films, I've done half-hour films. The longer a film is, the more complex its nervous system gets. And sometimes you'll detect a problem, like it'll become dull, or people will shift in their seats or something at a certain point, and it's tempting to go, the problem is there. But the problem actually, if you get under the hood, is something that happened 15 minutes earlier that is creating that problem there. So you have to be able to say no to really great things sometimes, and you have to sometimes look for the problem, not where the problem seems to be. So it's really weird.
Do you guys wait to see the movie when it's finished, or are you sort of involved in the process at all? And what's it like?
Well, we show you guys snippets as we go along. Yeah.
What's it like to see the completed version when you've been voicing something for so long?
Well, I mean, because, you know, I met Brad at Pixar when you wanted me to do Incredibles, and you were luring me into the doorway. But so the first Incredibles blew my, I was so completely not prepared. First off, because I was not really watching animated movies at that time in my life. I did not have children. I'd grown up watching Disney.
Animation's not just for children.
Yes, I know. Of course, I'm aware of that now. But, so The Incredibles, but I also think The Incredibles was a watershed moment, period, you know, in the industry, in people going to see movies, and the fact was that The Incredibles was made absolutely as much for adults as it was for children. I mean, and I was stunned. I had no clue what we were working on, like no clue. Because it is so piecemeal, and we are doing like lines, words. Maybe you'll show storyboards occasionally, but mainly you're describing stuff. We'll see templates, maybe a snippet here and there, but I was not prepared. Not prepared.
What's it like to have an action figure of yourself? That's going to be pretty cool.
Well, it's fantastic. I've got a lot of them. Buy them up. The one thing about, I'd seen the first one about, I don't know, at Pixar, it wasn't the whole film, it was when Ray Harryhausen was there, and there was kind of this assemblage of kind of a gift to Ray Harryhausen. Pixar was celebrating his work, and they had I'm not sure how many, maybe half the movie or less.
Something like that.
At the theater there, and I went and I took my grandkids with me, and I just remember thinking it was only half of it, and then they even had some of it was like line drawing, it was very small stuff, but some of it was completed, and it was just absolutely amazing. I mean, I didn't have, it's kind of like Holly said, I hadn't had this belief that you could put the two together. I don't know, it was more than an animated film. It just was more than that. It was a story, and the people they moved differently, the characters acted differently than anything I'd ever seen, so it was really exciting.
It's a movie and a dessert topping.
When you saw your character design, were you thrilled? Were you like, yeah, I look like that?
Absolutely.
What was hilarious was, before we were casting anybody, we were talking about, we kept describing the character as, you know, it's like, he's like a Craig T. Nelson type. And the strange thing is, this has happened to me several times where I keep describing a character as an actor, and then, but it never occurs to me to go to that actor first. And so it was like one of those obvious things where it was like, duh. We even had a shot of you from Poltergeist in our reel of, this is how the film will feel like it, you know?
Which shot?
Well, it's where he goes before, after, before.
Yeah. And we had all this really obvious stuff that Craig was the guy, but we hadn't thought that far yet. We were going, who do you think should play the Craig T. Nelson part? I don't know. It's, you know, John Travolta or Harrison Ford, or what do you think? Everybody goes, yeah, they're not Craig T. Nelson-y enough. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah. Let's take one more. Sure, right there.
Lost my notes.
Oh, you have notes?
No, because I wanted to applaud you for your film. I really appreciate it because, like Ms. Hunter, who I've been a fan of you since Raising Arizona, but I didn't go see animated movies, and yours was the first one. And
that was your gateway drug, huh?
Yeah. But to my question, so my son is a young comedian, 16, and when you're casting, because you did you lured Miss Hunter into it, are you looking for the voice? Do you already have that voice? Or
yes.
are you actually looking for the
yes. In fact, we do a thing where if you have a voice in mind, where you cut in samples of them from films, audio samples, and you do it 2 drawings or sculptures of the character so that you can see how they match with the character. And we actually designed Bob long before we went out to any voices. I had the project for over a year before I went to Pixar. And that was just his design. And Holly was the same kind of thing. We're looking for somebody who has vulnerability but strength, in the voice. And when I did Ratatouille, they had designs, and they'd had several actors, like pages of actors, come up to read for Remy before I got involved. And I cut a Patton routine where he criticizes a steakhouse. I forget what it is, but I cut various drawings of Remy to that comedy routine of the steak. See, comedy, yeah. And it fit beautifully. I looked at that little rat, and that voice sounded like that could come out of that rat, and everybody gets kind of sold on it. But sometimes you'll try 3 different actors to a drawing and see how it feels. But in the case of these guys, they were kind of the only ones that we tried, and we went, perfect, let's go.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I want to remind people, in case you don't know, this movie is on Netflix now, so you can watch it again and again and again, or go buy it. That's even better. Again, congratulations on a beautiful movie. Thank you so much.